everyone! So today I'm filming a Q&A video where I'll be answering questions that were asked on Instagram. I was asked a lot more questions than I was expecting, so I'm just going to go ahead and get started and try and get through as many as I possibly can, even though I probably won't be able to answer them all. And I also just want to apologize in advance for mispronouncing anyone's usernames and paraphrasing questions because I'm horrible and really prone to doing that. Okay, so JDkins asked, how do you stay so organized, and do you plan on making anything from more recent history such as the 1920s and 1960s? To answer your second question, I've actually made a few dresses inspired by the 1950s, and I plan on making more in the near future. I do have plans for a 1920s dress as well, I just haven't gotten the fabric for it. I keep things organized because I find it really frustrating when things are out of place, and I currently have an organization system set up that works for me and my needs and isn't based off of anything I found online and thought looked cute. So it's just a really functional organizational system, which really helps. And the way I keep everything in place is by taking a few minutes every day just to tidy everything up and put things away. And that way nothing builds up and it doesn't become too overwhelming and too messy to work in. And that's pretty much it. It's just being committed to doing a little bit every day so it doesn't get too disastrous. Lady Quilt asked, when I made my first period dress after I stopped cosplaying, which one was it and where did you get your inspiration from? I don't remember which one it was since I made a few historical costumes while I was still cosplaying, but I think it was a very simple maroon dress, and it was inspired by the Renaissance period, or more specifically the TV series The Borgias, because I absolutely loved the costume design in that, and it really inspired me to attempt my own historical costumes. Christy Matos asked, what or who inspired you to start sewing, and what's one tool that you use, aside from your sewing machine, the most? I probably use my scissors the most, which are just Ginger scissors that were like 20 bucks on Amazon. As for who inspired me, my mom was the one who originally encouraged me to start sewing, but I was really inspired to start making my own costumes and to start blogging about the process. Thanks to a cosplayer called Cameo Cosplay. She's incredibly talented and I still really look up to her to this day. Pizza 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 Song asked, what's your favorite kind of fabric to work with, and do I have a least favorite? My least favorite is chiffon. It just sucks. There's nothing that I like about working with chiffon. It's just horrible. But I do like how it looks in finished costumes, which is why I keep using it. And my favorite would probably be cotton sateen and polyester shanting. They're relatively inexpensive and they're stiff enough that they can be used on their own, but they're also thin enough that you can gather them down quite tightly and they won't look too bulky. They iron easily, they don't fray too much, so they're definitely up there on my list of favorites. But as for my favorite fabric I've ever worked with, I'm currently using this silk shanting and it's just beautiful. I've loved every second of working with it. It drapes so nicely and has the prettiest sheen and I'm just in love with it. I wish I could make every costume out of that fabric because it's been awesome. That Tall Turner asked, what's your favorite era to make costumes from, and what's your favorite type of clothing to make? I would say my favorite is probably the 1830s, though I'm really digging the 1890s right now. I just love the full skirts and the full sleeves and the interesting bodices from those periods. I think they're a lot of fun. They're also pretty quick to make since they didn't rely very heavily on trims or embellishment during those periods. It was more about having a fun fabric and design, which makes them quite enjoyable to work on. My favorite type of clothing to make would be dresses or headpieces. I really love making hats and headdresses. I just find them a lot of fun, and I just think dresses are really pretty and they're my favorite thing to wear. Bananers722 asked if I could travel anywhere in the world, where would it be? I would love to go to Scotland or Germany and just tour all the castles and churches. I think it would be so much fun. We just don't have any architecture like that here in the United States, so I'd love to be able to see it and admire it and pretend like I live in it. And I would love to go to Italy for the same reason. D by Lou asked, what's one project that you feel like you don't have the ability to sew for now but wished you could? I don't think I'd be able to do all the elaborate embroidery on an Elizabethan project. I just don't think I'm anywhere near that level. And I kind of wish I was, even though I probably wouldn't want to invest that much time into it. But I'd be up for making pretty much anything else if I had the materials and time to do it. Rebecca Wild asked, have I ever considered altering clothing to fit a design or getting my fabric from secondhand stores? Yes, I have, and the reason I've never done it is because the clothing in the thrift stores near where I live tends to be quite overpriced, and it ends up just being cheaper to buy the fabric to remake whatever I'm envisioning than to actually buy the clothing. And as for fabric in thrift stores, I've never actually been to a thrift store that sells fabric, and the curtains and bedding and fabric alternatives that they do sell tend to be quite overpriced as well, so it just never ends up being worth it. Lindsay Knits asks, how do you research your costumes and do you strive to be as authentic as possible? And in terms of garment structure, what do you find the most challenging piece to sew? I'll answer the second part first. I find sleeves really difficult. Sewing them on, draping them, drafting them. They're the one part of a costume that really needs to be flat drafted instead of draped, and I'm just terrible at flat drafting, so I always have to make several mock-ups before getting them right. And as for research, I tend to mostly use books, but if there's anything I'm unsure about, I'll look for specific articles online. And if I'm searching for inspiration for a very specific era, then I'll use Pinterest or museum archives, since they have a lot more examples of fashion than a book does. As for authenticity, I try and keep the construction and the pattern and the silhouette as historically accurate as possible, but I am all for taking advantage of modern materials and fabrics and embellishments and using those on historical costumes. My end goal is always to make a costume I'm happy with, and I feel like it's easier to do that with access to those materials. And I also feel like you can make a costume look more authentic and more realistic by using inaccurate materials, which doesn't really make any sense, but it helps add to the texture and the drama of the garment, which makes it feel like it belongs in another time, even if they wouldn't have had access to those things. But I do try and keep the silhouette and the pattern relatively historically accurate. H. Wilkinson 14 asked, do you prefer the design/research process or the sewing construction process when making a costume? I definitely prefer the sewing process. I really love the designing and the research when I'm doing it, but I have no issue spending 6 hours a day sewing, but if I was spending 6 hours a day researching, I'd probably get pretty bored. So I definitely feel like I prefer the sewing. Ocean Child 13 asked, what were some of the first things you made when you were learning to sew? I was so impatient, I started making clothing right away. I didn't make wearable clothing, and I didn't really finish anything until several months after I started. But yeah, I didn't want to waste time on the boring stuff. I wanted to dive right into making stuff that I could actually wear. So that's what I did. Alpha Gutierrez, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, asked, what or how do you feel when you put on one of your costumes? Which is your favorite decade, and who is your favorite musical character? I don't know if I have a favorite musical character, but my favorite musicals are Wicked and Legally Blonde. I really love the soundtracks for both of those. I usually feel uncomfortable when I put on one of my costumes. There is a moment of sort of awe and wonder when I look in the mirror with the full getup on, but for the most part I'm usually focused on how bobby pins are stabbing me in the head and how much my legs are sweating because of all the petticoats. It isn't a really magical back-in-time type of feeling, though perhaps that was how they felt back in time. I don't know if I have a favorite decade, but my favorite period of fashion are the mid-1600s. The fashion from that time was so unique, and that's when my favorite painters, Rembrandt and Peter Paul Rubens, were creating works. So I really enjoy seeing that period throughout their art, and it's definitely made me favorite over any other period. Someone else asked, what is my least favorite period of fashion? And that would probably be the late 1600s and early 1700s. It was kind of a transitional period for fashion, and I just think the dresses from that era look really sloppy, and I don't like them at all. JMH1222 asked, what is your favorite piece that you've made? My favorite costume I've ever made is the plaid walking ensemble. I absolutely love that dress, and I still look at that and just can't believe that I made it and wore it. I'm so incredibly proud of it and how it turned out. And that's the first time I made a costume, and after it's been finished I felt like my skills leveled up. I just adore everything about that costume. But I do also really like the cycling costume that I recently finished, and I really like my Civil War era dress that I recently finished. Dominique Gardina asked, what type of music do you listen to and what are your favorite TV shows? My favorite shows have all unfortunately ended, but I was a huge fan of Psych and Scrubs and Pushing Daisies, and I really enjoyed Downton Abbey. And though I don't love the normal episodes, the Top Gear specials from the UK are my absolute favorite things to air on TV ever. I just find them absolutely hilarious, and I can watch them over and over again and still like almost pee myself laughing. They're so great. But shows that I'm currently liking include Brain Dead. I really enjoyed Alone when it was on. I really like River Monsters. I've seen every episode twice, I think. It's stupid. And I'm really liking American Ninja Warrior. I also watch a lot of the partner with a twist type of shows, so like Bones and Elementary. And I really liked Castle when it was on. So that sort of stuff. As for music, I listen to a lot of mainstream indie music, like Passenger and the Lumineers and Mumford & Sons. but I also listen to stuff like Fall Out Boy and 21 Pilots, and I download a bunch of songs from Queen that I've been really digging recently. I like The Killers and Green Day and probably a bunch of other stuff that I'm forgetting. And I recently downloaded some songs from Good Grafe and Zella Day and Borns, and I've been really enjoying all of those. They're kind of pop, but unique pop, I guess. And then I also listen to a lot of songs from musicals because I find they make me really happy. Costume Diva 1 asked, do any of your machines or dress forms have names? I wish they did. I tried to name them. The names did not stick. I still think of them as being my sewing machine and my dress form rather than whatever names I came up with, so unfortunately they do not. A few people asked if there are any costumes from books or films that I'd like to recreate, and the answer is no, except for potentially Disney princess dresses. I think that would be so much fun to do, just putting my own twist on them and bringing them to life, but unfortunately it'd be too expensive of a project to take on, and it wouldn't really add to my portfolio, so that will probably never end up happening. Andres Gonzalez 2469 asked, if you had to choose a fashion school to go to in New York, which one would you go to? And do you prefer vintage Dior or vintage Chanel? I definitely prefer vintage Dior. I actually love a lot of vintage Dior. I think it's gorgeous. And if I had to pick a fashion school, I would probably go to FIT because I toured it and it looks amazing. I'm just not interested in going to a fashion school. Rachel of Rohan asked what my favorite snack is. I don't know if it counts as a snack, but I'm obsessed with Heath ice cream by Breyers. I will eat that any time of day in any quantity for any meal. I just adore it. It's so good. But an actual snack food would probably be the plain Lay's stacks. I just like that they're potato chips and that they're salty and that they taste delicious and that they're all the same size. It makes me happy, and I could eat large quantities of those as well. The Misery of Wind asked if I ever miss cosplay and if I plan on going back to it at some point. I really don't miss it at all. I much prefer doing the historically inspired stuff, and the only thing I felt like I want to recreate are dresses from Crimson Peak, but it isn't something I've really been tempted to go back to. And Kane's DF asked which one of my dresses is my favorite and which one I hate the most and why. I already mentioned my favorite earlier, the plaid walking costume. My least favorite would probably be, I don't know, there are a lot of dresses I made that I consider fails, including an 1890s dress that I recently completed, and there's an 1880s project that I've been working on that didn't turn out very well. But the one that I still cringe thinking about would be my Elsa cosplay. I don't regret making it since the press involved with that was such a wonderful experience, and it really boosted my followers on WordPress and Tumblr and probably contributed to me having a YouTube channel now. So I definitely don't regret making it, but I do really dislike how it turned out. I'm just not happy with it, and there are a lot of things I wish I'd done differently, and every time I see a picture of it I kick myself a little bit because I invested so much time into it and I could have done it so much better. Erica Davey asked, can you imagine how many people follow you around the world? And how do you feel about it? No, I can't really imagine it. It sort of baffles me that there are even 10,000 people out there that follow my blog or follow this channel or see the content that I post, and imagining that many people from a different country who speak a different language seeing my work, it's absolutely mind-boggling. Last year there was an article about me on a Russian news site and it had over 100,000 shares on Facebook, and that's just shares, not even views, and that's from people who live thousands of miles away from me, who speak a different language and have a different culture, and they're enjoying my silly little costumes. So yeah, it's very hard to imagine. I don't think I really can imagine the scale of it, but I'm incredibly grateful for it, and I think it's absolutely amazing. Kaylee Gwen asked, which era would you like to make a costume from that you haven't visited yet? I really enjoy the phrasing of that question. I think it's really cute. I'd like to make a dress from the 1600s. As I said earlier, that's one of my favorite periods of fashion, and I love how artists documented it, so I'd love to make something from that era. And I would also really like to make a 17th century Hungarian gown. They're so incredibly unique and elaborate and different from a lot of the other historical costumes out there, and I really hope I get to make one someday. Missy Greet asked how many wigs do I have and where did I buy them? Since I cosplayed for 2 years, I managed to collect 30 wigs or something insane like that, but I plan on selling most of them since a bright green wig with twin tails doesn't pair very nicely with historical costumes. I bought them all from eBay except for a few Arta ones, which I really would not recommend, and I try to buy from sellers that have good feedback and seem to have good consistency with their photos, since that means you're more likely to get the wig that's actually pictured, and if the wig arrives and it's terrible quality or it's not what was shown in the pictures, then I just complain to eBay and you can usually get your money back. Lady Pendragon asked, I know you love historical garments, have you thought about making something from Outlander? I really love the costume design from Outlander, and I really love the blog that the designer runs. It's incredible, and if you haven't seen it, you should check it out. But I don't actually watch the show, so I don't have any plans of recreating anything from it just yet, but maybe someday. And Rachel Moe asked, what made you transition from cosplay to historical clothing? It just got to a point where I wasn't really interested in anime, and I was picking characters more because of what they were wearing rather than what their personality was like. Around that time I also saw the TV show The Borgias and the movie The Three Musketeers, which both have absolutely stunning historical costumes, and it made me want to try my hand at it, and I enjoyed it so much that I never stopped. Lilith099 asked, what is the most difficult costume you've ever done? Probably my 16th century Tudor project. I think I had to remake every part of that costume at least once. It was so time consuming and so difficult, but it did work out in the end. Johnny Official asked, which era silhouette do you enjoy the most? Do you prefer your giant ball gowns or your slimmer dresses? I absolutely adore my larger dresses. I love the silhouette from the 1860s with the huge elliptical hoop skirts. I think they're so much fun, and they make me smile every time I put one on, even though the skirts for them are very heavy. Ginger Gone Wild asked what some of my other hobbies are, and to be honest, I don't have that many. When I'm not sewing, I'm usually editing videos or photos related to my costumes, or I'm writing blog posts. And if I'm not doing that, then I'm probably procrastinating by reading too much fan fiction or playing stupid phone games like Plants vs. Zombies and Tetris Attack and Block Puzzle. I get really into that sort of thing. But sewing really is my main and only hobby, and it's what I spend the vast majority of my time doing. Vanilla Wick asked, what's your favorite place you've traveled to? To be honest, I haven't been anywhere that exciting, but we did go on a cruise to Alaska when I was much younger. It's such a beautiful place, and seeing the glaciers and the scenery was just a wonderful experience. Mo Gliz Code asked, is there a specific reason you focus on older style costumes? Do you just make them to expand on techniques, or do you make them because you like the style and find them aesthetically pleasing? I just find them so much more interesting than modern clothing. I think it's fascinating the amount of work that used to go into creating clothing, the amount of embellishment and time and effort and material. It just fascinates me, and I love recreating that. Getting to play with the different proportions and headpieces and styles and petticoats, I just find it so much fun, and I really don't feel that way about modern clothing. Madison Tobin asked, do you have any role models as far as sewing and costume design goes? I definitely do. As I said, I really like the blog for the woman that designs costumes for Outlander. I believe her name is Terry Dressage, but I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. I also really love the designer for the Borgias, whose name is Gabrielle Pisucci, I want to say, but I might be butchering that as well. And I'm a big fan of the blog Before the Automobile. The things she creates are just absolutely incredible. And of course, I'm a really big fan of Sandy Powell. Her work and designs are just incredible, and I hope I'm half as talented as her someday. TBO asked, how old is Gwen, and do you have any other dachshunds? Yes, we have 2 miniature dachshunds, and they were rescued, so we don't know their exact ages, but they're probably around 9 or 10 now, which is why Gwen has such a gray face. Suraj Vinter asked, when not wearing work clothes, what kind of style do you prefer to wear? I really like the very girly style, so like I love this shirt, things with high necks and bows and dresses. I just absolutely adore, but to be completely honest, I'm really lazy when it comes to clothing, and I wear what I find comfortable rather than going for a specific style or something that necessarily flatters my body shape. And I wish that wasn't the case, but I obviously don't wish hard enough because I haven't made an effort to change that. Marjorie Wang asked, what is your favorite movie? And my favorite movie is How to Train Your Dragon, and I really like How to Train Your Dragon 2 as well. And I'm a big fan of the movie Tangled. I could watch those 3 films over and over and still really enjoy them. And something different that I really love is the movie Tucker and Dale vs. Evil. It's so stupid, but it's so funny. I absolutely adore that film. A rugby chick asked, where do you get your discipline for sewing? Still have some UFOs lying around here that I can't seem to finish. I have lots of projects that I haven't finished. I think part of being a creative person is knowing what's worth finishing and what isn't, and sometimes I get 70% of the way through a project and decide it just isn't worth it and I don't have the enthusiasm to move forward, and it sucks when that happens, but it happens. But usually I'm motivated to finish things just because I've already worked so hard on them. I want to see them through to the end, so I don't feel like I've wasted my time and material money. But as I said, that doesn't always end up happening. I'm No Hoblin asked, what are your favorite colors and fabric patterns? I love dark red. Like, there's a specific shade of red that I'm just all over. I feel like I'm addicted to that shade of red. I love it so much. But in general, I really like the colors of gemstones, so like a rich emerald green or sapphire blue. As for patterns, I've been really into stripes recently. I've bought so many striped or plaid fabrics, and I want even more. They're just so much fun to work with, and I love playing with that print. Is Tac268 asked if I'm single, which is a question I actually got from a few people, and I am. You might not have guessed this considering I basically post photos of myself in costumes all the time, but I'm a pretty serious person, and if I was in a relationship, I would want it to be pretty serious too. And I just don't feel like I'm ready for a serious relationship, so it isn't something that I've really sought out. ShannyBaby75 asked what sewing machine I use. It's an industrial Singer sewing machine. It's the newest model. I don't remember the name offhand, but I will put it on screen if you're interested. I got mine from eBay, but I know several sewing supply stores sell it, and you can also get it on Amazon. Judy Rebecca Graham asked, would you make an outfit for Guinevere? I've actually made 2 outfits for Guinevere. She is dressed up as Momo from Avatar: The Last Airbender, and she's also dressed up as a baby night fairy from How to Train Your Dragon. And she looked freaking adorable in both costumes. But I don't plan on making her anything else in the future. I'm not really big on dressing her up. I just thought those 2 costumes would be too cute to resist. And I think with that, I'm going to end this video. Thank you so much for watching, especially if you made it all the way to this point, since I'm sure this video is quite long. I really hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed learning a little bit more about me. I really appreciate all the questions that everyone submitted, and I hope I did them justice. So thank you again for watching, and I shall talk to you in the very near future.